I hear them scream, and I feel my jaw begin to do that goddamn thing it always does. Disconnects? That's what it feels like. The blood begins to pour from my cheeks, and I feel the warmth of it as my jaw extends itself into that same old brutal primal shape. A gray cloud has been hovering over Pennsylvania for the last 2 weeks, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible. The rain began before Labor Day and hasn't let up since. The story I'm about to tell you is true and also a warning. Due to circumstances beyond my control, as you will come to find out, I've been told that I may not be the most reliable source. But bear with me. Last weekend, I was home alone. A few college bros and I rent a house just off of the main street in Phoenixville, PA. The homes in the area tend to have a somewhat shoddy exterior, old steel and wood porches that fawn out over the sidewalk like crooked teeth, but the insides almost always have a quaint coziness, and ours was no different. Like I said, it had been raining non-stop for days. My roommates had gone on an impromptu weekend trip to the Jersey Shore to get away from it all. P.S. It was raining there too. I love them, but they're idiots. I found myself on this particular lazy, wet afternoon with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Me, being the person I am, decided to take a peek through one of the many dating apps that have eaten up the memory on my old iPhone 5. About 2 months ago was the last time I had a real boyfriend. Of course, he decided he liked girls again, and that was the end of that. Ever since, my dating life has become something of a free-for-all, for lack of a better term. Such is life. Shitty, terrible, awful, unfulfilling life. But I digress. I ended up going with Grindr, the perennial favorite. The app sprung to life, and I was greeted by the usual hodgepodge of faceless, headless torsos, of mostly straight guys just looking to get off. I knew the thirst well myself. Within minutes, I was chatting it up with a few choice dudes. Nothing too serious, nothing too salacious. This is actually the interesting part, looking back. I was texting 3 different guys, having blocked the 2 pics that appeared without so much as a "what's up," and I settled on Einar without even thinking about it. Einar. I think it was the name really, just something different and unusual. He was tall, not classically handsome, but there was something, I don't know. It was the eyes, I think. A cliche, I know, but something about his eyes. I just couldn't say no. He told me he was on Main Street, all alone at an outdoor bar. I somehow didn't think anything of this despite the rain. He was just looking for some company. Nothing serious. So I texted back that I would be there in 10 minutes, just like that. You know, it's funny, again, thinking back on the weirdness of it all. I barely remember putting on my shoes, grabbing my hoodie. I don't even recall the walk. All of a sudden, I was there, just standing there in the rain, the usual semi-drunken crowds of Saturday evening on Main Street Paville surging around my body. I was standing before one of the countless bars that line the street from one end to the other. Had Einar named the place I was supposed to go to? I couldn't remember. Surely he had to. How did I get there? I looked at the recently renovated old bar before me, the patrons scrunched into the back portion, under the awning and away from the rain. In the far back, I could make out a fat white guy pivoting around, working a pair of steel drums, belting out a Marley cover that actually didn't sound half bad, all things considered. There was a light crash of thunder that muted both the heavy conversation and the music, but only for a moment. "Hey!" Einar called. It was practically a whisper, but I still heard it, clear as a bell, despite the crowd and the rain and the elongated low rumble from the gray sky above. There he sat, all alone, just like he said, at the outdoor bar that perched to the right of the building itself. He was the only one, of course. There wasn't even a bartender. He seemed a little hunched. Crooked? That sounds weird, I know, but it's the best way I can describe him. Again, not bad looking, but almost as if his skeleton was just a half-inch too big for his body. The drops fell lightly upon him, the bars of the overhead open awning not really doing much of anything to stop the rain. From above and to the sides, he was illuminated by the old-fashioned style Christmas lights that snaked around the walls as well as the bar top itself, casting a muted, almost sickening orange glow upon the lone drinker. "Hey," Einar said again as I found myself approaching him. "Hey," I responded quietly. "Nice night," he remarked as he patted the empty, wet seat next to him. It was night. The sky now a completely rain-soaked black canvas above us. I remember at this point feeling that first pang of caution in my gut as something warm suddenly coursed through my body. Impossible, I hadn't had a single drop. I certainly felt like it though. Einar smiled and I dismissed the caution immediately. He handed me a can. It was Dogfish Sequench, a relatively new beer in the area and my favorite of the season. Thanks. I smiled as I slid into the wet seat next to him. Drops continued to fall upon us, the Christmas lights casting a warm amber glow upon the bar top that reflected in my glasses. I went to remove them, and Einar reached out, stopping me. Before I knew it, he was cupping my cheek, and before I knew that, he had kissed me. I wouldn't say I'm particularly bashful about who I am. My friends are aware of my preference, as is most of my family on one side anyway. Even so, I tend to keep the PDA to a dull roar. But here I was, before all these people, kissing a strange man I said all of 2 words to in person. And yet, I was blushing. Really blushing. And I'll keep the intimates to myself, but I was suddenly filled with that same old hunger. You know the one? Maybe not. Behind us, within the bar itself, a few patrons noticed. I heard a couple girls in a large group give a long awe, followed by a snicker or two from the guys. He was in a bit of a haze when Einar pulled away from me and looked at them, the group in the bar. With an abrupt halt, all noises ceased except the falling of the rain and the distant reggae music. "Want to get out of here?" he asked me. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Not yeah, not sure, yes, period, definitive." I grabbed Einar by the hand and we began to move through the bar and out into the rainy streets. It was really falling now, sending crowds of bar hoppers indoors. A flash of lightning illuminated the streets as we crashed through puddles on our way back to the house. "Roommates?" Einar asked as we got to the door. "Not tonight," I said with obvious lust in my eyes. That pang from earlier had completely faded away. I was definitely ready for this. Einar smiled as we bounced through the front door. He wrapped his arms around my smooth body, kissing me with a passion I hadn't experienced in months. Intertwined, we moved throughout the house and towards the door to my basement bedroom. "Down here?" Einar smiled. "Down there," I said, and that warmth from earlier filled me once more. And like it does every single goddamn time the awful hunger strikes, things got a little blurry. I do remember the look on Einar's face. I always remember the look on their face, unfortunately. Those same wide, frightened eyes. The look of surprise as my hands shove against them, as they tumble backwards down the stone steps leading to the basement. I always gag next, just before I completely black out. I hear them scream, and I feel my jaw begin to do that goddamn thing it always does. Disconnects? That's what it feels like. The blood begins to pour from my cheeks and I feel the warmth of it as my jaw extends itself into that same old brutal primal shape. There's more screaming, and then things go completely blank. When I come to, I'm always the same, naked, alone, curled up and covered in blood, surrounded by all those parts, the ones that just wouldn't stay down. I can see the remains of Einar's pulpy body resting in one of the other nests that sit upon the cool basement floor. Across from Einar is the ex and that bitch he took off with, now a jumble of parts along with last week's meal. Some f***ing scene twink that just couldn't take no for an answer. The roommates were still working on that one. "Why do we do it alone?" I once asked one of the roomies. "Wouldn't it be easier as a group?" I rose from my own nest, now quite satiated. My jaw ached but had reverted to its, well, normal form. I looked at Einar. The sadness was always next, and I despised that part most of all. Hate the blackouts. I really do. And if you're wondering what the hell I am, good question. But this is your only warning, I'm not human. And if you're out there on a Saturday night looking for a good time in rainy old Paville, just be careful, because I'm out there, and I'm always hungry.